We've got Paul in Pottsville. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Matt.
Oh, this is way too loud in here. We're going to turn the volume down in the studio, but you can go ahead.
Yeah, Matt, several months ago you said something that has me thinking, and I want to make a point about humanism and atheism. And let me just ask you, if I understood you correctly, all life can be described as being like a tree spreading out from a common ancestor, and so everything alive today has been evolving just as long as everything else alive today. And so differences in living beings do not necessarily mean that some are better than others or superior to others, as if living beings are possessing superior or lower locations on something like a ladder or chain of being. Is this correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's mostly, if not entirely, accurate.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, now I'll tell you a story, and I want to make a point on about humanism and atheism. Okay, now, assuming that that's true, and I have no reason to dispute your very clear presentation of evolution there. Okay, now suppose a woman is walking along, or a man is walking along and comes across an isolated house that is engulfed in flames. She hears what sounds like a dog whimpering or a baby crying. She runs into the house that is almost like a towering inferno, and she judges that she has time only to save either the puppy or the baby, but not both, before the flaming second floor collapses on the first. And she does choose to save the puppy instead of the crying baby. She happens to like puppies more than babies. Would you say, as an atheist and a humanist, would you say there's anything wrong with her choice? And if so, what is it?
First of all, I don't think there's enough information for me to evaluate. I mean, if there's a burning building and somebody runs into it to save anybody or anything, I think they're already doing something remarkable.
Oh, wait, there's so much wrong with this question already that I want to hit this right away. First of all, the idea first from the evolutionary standpoint has nothing to do with what you're asking.
Yeah, I don't know
it's
what
irrelevant.
Well,
so
let me tie it together here.
No, I know what you're saying. I just think you're wrong. What you're saying.
Let me just tie it together.
No, let her respond to this, and let her respond to this. Let her respond, and then you can try and tie it together.
What you're trying to say, I mean, I think it's pretty clear. What you're trying to say is that because objectively, from a biological standpoint, these things are equivalently evolved based on what you were describing before, that means that a human being will not put more value on another human being over another species, or if they do, that's normal. And that has to do with a particular species, a social species, and how social species are evolved and how they value. So for a member of a social species absolutely recognizes and will put greater value on other members of its own species. We see this in wolves, we see this in chimpanzees. I mean, if there's an animal that comes into that territory that is a threat, those pack animals, those animals that are very highly social, especially like predatory animals, they are going to come together, they are going to eliminate that threat, they are going to protect their own, right? But this has nothing to do with them evaluating two things as more or less evolved. It has to do with a social species values members within the group because that is to its best survival benefit.
And I'll let you tie your thing together, but the point that I was going to address on this was that I don't have enough information. Maybe in this scenario, it was the case that the puppy was closer and more easily accessible. If they were equivalent, if she had exactly the same odds of rescuing one over the other and chose to rescue the puppy over the baby, there are people who would probably view that as morally repugnant because they have a preference for their own species. On the other hand, I would tend to take the view that while I think most people would probably try to save the baby over the puppy, that the fact that somebody ran into a burning building at risk of their own life and limb to rescue anything, I'm not going to begrudge them necessarily for a decision they made. Do I think that they should have made a better decision, or is there a better decision from my standpoint as a human being that could have been made? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not rational to expect a
has nothing to do with evolution.
Well, it's not rational to expect a social animal to not help one of its own over something that's not part of its immediate group.
But I don't see what this has to do with your initial tree thing, so go ahead and tie that together.
Well, I think Tracie hit it on the head that I was saying, that because the baby and the puppy are not possessing superior locations on anything like a ladder or chain of being, because they both have been evolving for exactly the same length of time.
Which doesn't mean a thing. Which doesn't mean a thing, even in the context of what you're talking about. Because first of all, the fact that things have been, or lines have been evolving for the same time. First of all, change is not constant across all branches. Some branches are going to grow more leaves than others, and some are going to advance in areas faster than others, or it doesn't mean that change is a constant along these lines. But when we say that they aren't valued any differently, we're saying that there's no intrinsic value from the standpoint of a neutral universe to both of these nodes on the tree. But from each of those nodes, there will be, most likely, especially as Tracie pointed out in Social Creatures, a valuation of their particular species or things that are close to their species as higher. For example, why would you go with baby and a puppy? Why not go with baby and a cockroach?
Or a cat and a dog.
Okay. That's all very interesting, Tracie and Matt. Thank you for advancing my thought. But let me just say this. I think it's safe to say that most people, when they meet an atheist, they would prefer that the atheist would tell them that they're a humanist and that they share the same value of humans over animals, although I realize that...
Why do you think that? Why do you think that most people...
it's optional in an atheistic worldview that it is a social convention to be a humanist.
It's optional in religion too.
Yeah, see, here's the thing. When I was growing up as a fundamentalist Christian, Southern Baptist, the only thing I ever heard about atheists was that they were evil people destined or striving to destroy God's country and take prayer to schools and things like that. And when I first heard the term secular humanist, you know what I heard? I was told.
What did you hear, Matt?
I was told that secular humanist is just code word for those evil atheists so that they can hide. So I don't know why you think that people, when they first meet atheists, would rather hear that they're a humanist.
Well, they probably don't need to hear that word because they don't know what that means.
Well, my other thing is that I'm not
value humans over other.
Well, wait, just to be fair, I mean, I think I understand a bit what he's trying to say, and
Thank you, Tracie. I appreciate that.
I might be wrong, but I'm going to give it a shot. Part of the reason we do this program is because of misconceptions about atheism. So when you say, hey, a lot of people have a misconception about atheists as being uncaring or being, I mean, we do get maligned.
Well, this is, no. I'm sorry. I don't mean let me not get into pejoratives and trash talk, but here's the thing, this thing that you're saying, you think most people would rather hear upon first meeting an atheist that they're a humanist. Well, first of all, I in the context of what you're talking...
Not those words, Matt.
Well, here's the thing.
I think they would like to see an atheist... I think they would like to see an atheist show attention to their child before they see the atheist show attention to their dog. You know, I think it's just sort of a practical human thing.
Paul.
Yes.
What the hell kind of conversations are people having with atheists upon first meeting where it's something that one of the first things you'd point out is that you care more about people than dogs?
No, you usually learn that somebody's an atheist long after you first met them.
Yes.
But if their first memory is, you know, they really cared about my kid, I think that would carry, that would let them know that they're safe.
But
that propaganda that they've been given, that an atheist is a wicked, evil person.
I'm not giving them that impression. That is religionists who are giving them that impression. And the religionists who discover that impression is false, perhaps by watching our show or interacting with other atheists and interacting with other humanists, should work to clean up their own damn house.
Yeah, I would take issue with somebody who was proscribing, or I don't know, I might be using proscribing acrylic. I would take issue with somebody who would ask me to identify myself as a humanist first and then an atheist. But if you're simply pointing out that most people would have a preference for that, I think they might, because most people are probably going to be more friendly disposed to the term humanist than atheist, but I think that's all the more reason for me to present myself as an atheist.
Well, my big problem here is that I don't understand.
Tracie, you understand me.
I don't understand why why this conversation is taking place, because it doesn't, because I'm talking.
I'm sorry.
because it doesn't represent anything that happens in reality. People engage me in conversations and interact with me, and at some point, the subject of religion comes up, and at that point, they discover that I don't believe. That's how it goes every single time. So what difference does it make if somebody might prefer that they're I don't even know.
Well, if they remember that some of their first impressions of you reinforce some of their values.
I don't care. Maybe they're okay. We're still talking at cross purposes here because.
Well, let me just say this as a final thing, and then I'll let you get on to the next caller, Matt. I would say this, that within a theistic worldview, there is a chain of being. It may be just two links. There's the superior being, the supreme being, and there's everybody else, or maybe even animals and everybody else. All life, creaturely life on the same plane, perhaps. But in atheism, there is no chain of being, and therefore it becomes, I think one should be at least sensitive to the perception that Christians like people to express the value of humans over other creatures.
Oh my gosh, this is just stupid.
To their sense of safety even in a neighborhood where some very twisted things are said.
No, this is just bizarre.
Well, I mean, I would also like it sometimes, though, when somebody presents himself as a Christian, if they could convince me that they don't believe people are reprobate. I mean, to me, that the value of human beings is deserving of eternal torture, and not all Christians believe that. Some of them believe you just deserve death. But the idea that human beings are so devalued in that system bothers me. I try to tell myself that any particular Christian I meet is somehow cognitively, divorced from that they may be saying it and they may say they believe it, but I'm hoping that they don't really believe what they're preaching. And that gives, helps me out with them. So for a lot of times when I hear somebody present themselves, theistically, depending on the religion they say they represent, I would prefer to not think that they're thinking what I think they're thinking.
Yeah, it's not my worldview that holds that human beings are lesser.
No, you're a humanist. I know you don't.
Well, it doesn't matter even if I wasn't a humanist. This is not a humanist versus religionist. This is somebody who believes in a God and who believes this chain of being, which puts humans as inferior to something, versus those people who don't have that supreme being in their model, which doesn't put a being ahead of humans. It means that we are the primary concern of our actions, which is as it should be. And the fact that this is what's so confusing about this. First of all, you talk about what Christians might prefer. Well, on the one hand, I don't give a rat's ass what they might prefer because they're the ones with the immoral system, or it's not actually a system, the immoral pronouncements about morality. They're the ones with a view of humans that is repugnant. And how dare they pretend that those people who don't believe in a God, or they've been brainwashed by fears that simply have no truth. Now, I still don't see what, this idea of, well, never mind, we won't even go back to the evolution thing. But
can I just say one thing about what Tracie said concerning hell?
Okay.
It's been presented to me this way, and it really is a difficult doctrine for many Christians to accept. But one time it was presented to me this way, and I must say that maybe it's my Christianity that keeps me from seeing that this isn't a pretty good response. But in any case, I was shown that because Christians believe that man was made in God's image, the fact that God does not annihilate those who've chosen to not be in His heaven, to be separated from Him, that is a sort of a backhanded compliment to the fact that they're made in God's image. And I often thought about that and thought that might in fact be what's really going on, assuming, of course, there is a God and there is a heaven and a hell.
Yes, and why would we assume any of that? And by the way, you're looking at one particular doctrine of hell, that of separation from God, which, by the way, is a hell that I'm evidently thrilled to go to in an afterlife if the character of God as presented in the Bible is accurate. But there are other models of hell. the torturous fire and brimstone one.
Well, and also the idea
and
of
also
choosing to send yourself there. Like an atheist would
Yeah.
be going there, and how did we make a choice to go there?
Yeah, what is the criteria for salvation? Is it belief? Is it grace? I have a preacher friend of mine here in town who believes that I'm a Christian, that I'm still a Christian, because once saved, always saved, and he's going to see me in heaven. Now, how bizarre is that? What does that say about his? What does that say about his God? That his God would bring somebody to heaven who has no interest in being there and has actively been working in opposition to him. I mean, it just makes no sense to me, and I look forward to talking to him about it more in the future. But this model that you've talked about, where it's separation from God, so God is really giving the atheist a present. Okay, well, look at it however you want. None of that has any impact at all on these discussions about how we interact in reality. What happens in an afterlife is completely irrelevant to this life.
Well, that's interesting, Matt, that you would say that. I know a lot of Christians who would say that their view of heaven, the afterlife, really affects the way they live right here.
Well, you have no way of knowing. So what they're actually saying is, along lines of the dice example, is that they think it's possible that what they do is going to get them to the heaven that they've imagined they want and deserve, with no indication that that heaven is real or that those are the correct actions to actually do it, to actually get there. So they're compiling fictions.
But people also believe a lot of things about their religions that when they leave them, then it turns out it wasn't correct. So for example, I know people who are like, oh, I would have no meaning, my life would have no purpose if I left my religion. But then there's tons of people who used to say that who are now atheists, and they're just like, that was so silly. Like, I don't know why I said that. I don't know why I thought it. I mean, I believed that if I lost my religion, I was going to lose my purpose for living. And here I feel, that I have plenty of purpose for living, and I don't believe in God anymore. So they're not really able to put themselves in the shoes of someone who doesn't believe. They're kind of saying my fantasy of a person who doesn't believe is this dismal picture of someone who's like, purposeless or hateful, or what you were describing, horrible. It's this awful existence without a God, and that's what I would be like. And it's almost like a fear that keeps them where they are, because they don't really understand that it's not like that when you leave.
So they've got a fantasy of people who don't believe, and they've got a fantasy about the heaven that they'd like to go to, and they've got a fantasy about what they need to do to get to that heaven. Well, congratulations. Some of us would prefer to deal with reality than fantasy.
That's very interesting, Matt and Tracie. Could I just throw in real quick here? It looks to me like it might be difficult to explain somebody like Anthony Flew. Or do you have an explanation why he would leave atheism as one of the leading proponents of it intellectually and become a theist at the end of his life? Was it?
Sure.
Do you think it was fear of death? Because I have not heard that he really believed in an afterlife.
He doesn't. He didn't believe in an afterlife. He succumbed to some bad arguments and actually acknowledged that he gave over to bad arguments in conversations with Richard Carrier and others. And at the end, he maintained that he was convinced of a deistic position. So what? People make mistakes in thinking all the time. I don't think it's particularly impressive.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is...
Hang on. I don't think it's particularly impressive that someone who's about dead, whose mind may not be working as it used to, changes their position on something. I don't know what it was, but I do know that the arguments that were presented on his behalf are not sound arguments, and they are not the sort of thing, they're actually the sort of thing that Flew rejected earlier on and offers no reason for accepting them other than that he found them convincing late in life.
I was just going to say, and on the other hand, you have the Clergy Project.
Yeah, and for every Anthony Flew, there's 400 and some odd now in the Clergy Project?
Which is, just in case people don't know, it's atheist clergy that are trying to find a way to leave because they're convinced at this point they've lost their faith.
I mean, you have to, when somebody changes their mind, you want to know the reasons why they've changed their mind. And in the case of Flew, he's offered nothing other than he found this convincing. And when we look at what he said in the past and what others have written, but none of that matters, because Richard Dawkins could tomorrow decide to become a Muslim, and it wouldn't change one bit about what I think about the issues unless he presents actual evidence and argument for his change that I find compelling. I don't.
And I think we can respect that.
Yeah, it's what Anthony Flew or any other atheist on the planet thinks is completely irrelevant to, first of all, it has no impact on the truth, and it doesn't have any bearing on me, because I don't care that somebody happens to be a prominent atheist. I disagree with prominent atheists every single day. I disagree with Dawkins on things, Harris. I don't know if I actually disagree with Dennett on anything, but we might. Dave Silverman, P.Z. Myers, you pick your atheist. We're going to disagree on something. The difference, of course, is that we're not holding these people up as authorities that are likely to dictate some divine truth.
Matt, could I just ask you, in an atheistic world, though, why does truth matter so much to you?
Why wouldn't it matter?
It's all that you've got.
Why wouldn't it matter? It's all there is. See, here's the thing. My position of wanting to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible is about making sure that my internal model of reality that lives in my brain matches the actual reality that I inhabit as closely as possible. Because the decisions that I make are going to take place within that reality that I experience. And so if my internal model differs widely from reality, I'm going to make bad decisions that are going to be harmful to myself and others. And I'd rather make good decisions. Wouldn't you agree that the closer your internal model? Okay, so that's why truth matters. Even
in a world without any future except extinction, truth does matter, because it's very practical. You're saying there's a practical aspect.
What difference does the future make? What difference does whether or not I'm going to die make? It's like saying you shouldn't eat your lunch because you're just going to poop it out later. Well, it mattered at the time.
Yeah, and the fact is, I mean, like, I bought a house, right? And we had somebody come in and do an inspection, a home inspection, right? I mean, I don't want to spend a lot of my hard-earned resources on a house that has some major flaw and find out about it after I've committed to it and signed all the paperwork. I mean, there's a reason why you want to know what's actually going on every single day. Your life depends on understanding what actually is happening, not some fantasy.
I agree. Now, could we say this, though, that you could know what's true and you could still lie because it's a value. It will get you.
Yes, people lie.
People lie, and sometimes it's beneficial. So what?
Well, what I'm saying is, I think maybe some of it is your desire to master reality, and that's a very good thing. But there's no, how shall I say? There's no real penalty necessarily for lying in certain situations. Whereas in theism, there is that last accounting before the Supreme Being.
If you ask forgiveness, though, you get off the hook for everything, including child molestation.
Yeah, you could rape, pillage, and murder, and as long as you, terrible. At the end of your life, fulfill the obligations for eternal reward, you get. So don't pretend like you believe in some actual justice system. Christianity, in particular, and most of the other religions that offer some sort of escape clause, are not justice. It's capriciousness.
Yeah,
it's God picking and choosing who he wants to hang out with him on criteria that is not based on what people do.
So in a sense, could I say, Matt, that probably you would find, if there was anything to religion, you'd find karma a little bit more of an appealing sort of justice system.
No, karma's horrible. I mean, karma, basically, if a child gets raped, karma says the child deserved it. That's messed up. No, I would definitely not be into karma.
Now, as far as some idea of cosmic justice, of people getting what they deserve, if it were actually true, yeah, I think I would find that system sort of preferable, that you actually get what you deserve, in which case, instead of pointing to a kid and say that they deserve that kid wouldn't have been raped in an actual system of karma unless they deserved it.
But who deserves it?
Well, that's the thing, is that your objection to this is based on the idea that this couldn't be deserved, right. And if that's correct, then it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, because I mean, what could he did something in another life? Now he's 6 years old in this life.
No, I'm not talking about other lives. I'm not talking about other lives.
Okay,
I'm talking about this life.
Yeah, then I really have trouble with how a 6-year-old could deserve something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Tracie on the pronouncements of systems of karma saying, oh, if something bad happened to you, you deserved it. Because that's a perversion of this. If we were actually talking about a system where people actually got what they deserved, And I don't even know what that is, what that means. What do you deserve?
There's nothing that happens. I mean, this world, so much stuff happens that nobody could possibly ever deserve.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I didn't deserve, a cavity or, MRSA. Pick and choose. Anyway, Paul, there's other people waiting. I got to let you go.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank
You
you.
have a wonderful day now.
You too.
Thank you.